Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today.
Mike, welcome back to the podcast, my friend. How are you?
Thanks for having me. Very grateful to be back and sharing sort of relevant stuff with your great listener base.
Mate, I've loved every time we get an opportunity to get back together, because we have started sort of circling around and interacting with some of the similar professionals. I mean, you've been doing this far, far longer than I have, but the value of association and the number of people we've been able to mutually introduce each other to. More so, I think I'm in a bit of a deficit because I think you have introduced me to more impressive people than I have you. But this leads me to the fact that we obviously saw each other recently, the Emergency Services Show. Another great event, loads of great networking and a few things like that. As I was exploring around and we saw the UKRO stand, we had some conversation around heavy rescue and the fact that there is not really a great deal of support and resource for people out there. But it made me realize that we probably need to circle back and really expand and go in a little bit deeper, because the landscape has changed a little bit in the UK Fire and Rescue Service for this.
Yeah, I would say so. I'm not an active member in any service now, but obviously I come into contact with a lot of different services across, with what we do at IRRTC, and that's a real privilege for us. And we always take on board then what those individual services, we always ask a student on a course, why are you here? What benefit does it bring you? Blah, blah. But then throughout the course, you get snippets then of challenges they face in their own organisations and operationally.
Because sometimes people think they're sending somebody on a course just to tick a box, and they may not get back what they need. It's similar to the podcast. I always say to people, ask better questions, you'll get better answers. And you, as a sort of sector lead in developing people in this aspect of their role, is a real customer-centered aspect to it, where I suppose because you're perhaps a small organisation, you're quite agile and you can still adapt to the needs of the learner, even though I think you guys have got colossally busy over the last 18 months, so that's probably not still the case.
Yeah, no, that's right, Pete. I suppose we're in this, being an SME, we're in this position to be able to react quickly and adapt things where a big organisation can't. That's probably a good thing. But, I know it sounds corny, but we're totally led by the people that come on the courses, and we're focused on them walking out more competent and knowledgeable than when they arrived. That is our objective, nothing else. And value for money, so on. And the experience of it for them is critical. And what a privileged position to be in, because ultimately the public is the winner then, when these incidents happen at the roadside.
So take me to that aspect of the heavy rescue work that you guys do, because obviously I was lucky enough to come on my RTCI adventure with you boys and girls there, a couple of great leads that I had on my course. But one question that regularly came up with a lot of students was this aspect of large good vehicles, of heavy goods vehicles, because with the tremendous expansion of things like Amazon, with the roads being busier than ever, with a much more of these larger vehicles, but also with these, I suppose, more complex vehicles, when we think of the EV market and the structures of vehicles, we ended up leading some of our conversations into the challenges that are faced by crews when we are working with these larger vehicles, these heavy vehicles.
Yeah, well, look, I suppose it comes down to the physics of it. If you've got a great big 60-foot vehicle moving at 56 miles per hour and something goes wrong with it, it's probably not going to stop very quick. It's going to go into something else, another vehicle, street furniture, whatever. It's going to be not a good scene. Someone's going to have to respond to that, an emergency service. And it's how well those emergency services are then prepared to face that incident situation and deal with it. That's what we're trying to offer by exposing those services to the vehicles, the up-to-date knowledge, the tools, the techniques, stuff they can't get in their own services because of cost, resources, so on. And it all then feeds back into getting a qualification that's accredited, quality standards, robustness is there. So it means something. It's not just a certificate. But the real benefit is the knowledge they gain, the learning on the course with people from other services, which they take back to their own organisation. That's got to be the win for us, and that's what we strive for. So it's that exposure to these complex vehicles, the opportunity to work on them, learn the techniques, reflect on that, and use the best resources, cutting tools possible. But the key to it is the wonderful instructors we have. And I'll give mention to Kev Mitson and Al Patterson here.
Al was fantastic. I think Al was the lead on ours, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, because it's good to have that sort of lead, and then the other instructor either fits in with that. They slot in together. But when it comes to heavy vehicle rescue, the experience that Al's got, and his passion for it, and Kev as well, his technical knowledge, Kev's technical knowledge with the rescue equipment is second to none. So our courses would fall flat without the right instructors delivering them.
I know it's very much their sort of specialism when we think about some of the challenges that these are being faced. But for people that are earlier in their careers and completely unfamiliar with some of these aspects, or perhaps for someone that is looking to upskill members of their training department, what are the inherent differences in the challenges that are faced with these heavy goods vehicles?
Safety, risk, preparedness. I suppose, these incidents aren't going to happen as frequently as smaller vehicles, private light goods, private light cars, that kind of stuff. But obviously when they are involved, the physics, the forces are massively exaggerated compared to smaller vehicles. And that's where the challenges then arise. So, you're working higher up, you're dealing with stuff that weighs more. The vehicles are tougher, stronger, the technology is racing ahead, and the tools and the techniques and the training is struggling to keep up. So there's a bigger and bigger void starting to appear. And then we introduce the phenomenon of the full battery electric heavy goods vehicle. And that changes things again. So,
well, I think Amazon have got quite a few fully electric lorries out there now, haven't they?
20.
Jesus.
Yeah, they've got 20 on the primarily Leyland DAF vehicles, the XF fleet.
Where is the battery storage on something like that? Because I know in a lot of vehicles it's usually the full floor pan, but obviously lorries are significantly, the cab size is both bigger but also shorter.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
Here's the thing: if we look at a car, when a vehicle manufacturer makes a car, an electric vehicle, whatever brand it is, there's a legal requirement for them to produce an emergency responder guide. Got to do that. It's a legal requirement. Not the same for commercial vehicles in the same way. So you've got the you've got the emergency, you've got the ERG app, from NCAP, which we always recommend people to use. However, when it comes to a commercial vehicle, they're type tested, and that information is out there, but it's not as regularly updated as the car information responder guide. So that's where the problems then start. So going back to your point of an LGV, the traction batteries probably would be, or usually are, where the fuel tanks are in the internal combustion engine vehicle. But you may have 3 traction batteries each side of the vehicle, 6, and they're not protected by a whole lot other than some kind of fascia, and that's it. So should that vehicle be involved in an incident, a type of abuse that impacts whatever, the risk for those traction batteries is much bigger, much more energy in them. What damage could that occur? How might it change the rescue scene, the situation? How would crews be aware of that? These are only potentials. They're not fundamental definites. But you can see how things then start to change, because when we tell people there are full battery electric vehicle HGVs on the road, buses, lorries, all the rest of it, you can see their eyes opening, because if they were to go onto their MDT, for instance, in their appliance, it's probably a third-party app. It's definitely not going to be as up-to-date as,
So the ERG app, for people that are unfamiliar with it.
Emergency
Yeah,
Response
so
Guide.
this is the emergency response guide. The ERG contains an index list of dangerous goods and the associated ID number, the general hazards they pose, and the recommended safety precautions. It's a free app. We will put a link for this under IRRTC in the notes if people want to go down and have a look at that. One of the things that has come out in the last sort of 18 months or so as well is, and a lot of this was led by UKRO, which I imagine, you guys obviously have some of your instructors and trainers are from UKRO. You've got a lot of associations with the organisation. This aspect of the extrication competency framework, this is something that a lot of services are trying to find solutions to. These reflect national operational guidance and current best practice. Can we go into that a little bit? Because I think it's something that people would love a bit more of an insight in from training organisations such as yourself.
So this document, will be dated January 2022, but it was published off memory October 2022. 5 levels of competency. Obviously, you'll give a link to it in the show notes, so I won't. So, but it just details the competency levels now that a service will be expected to work towards as a framework to evidence how their operational members of staff are maintaining competencies in line with the needs today at the roadside. So the best example I can give you is if someone's done an instructor qualification as a service-wide instructor 10 years ago, how have these people maintained their competencies in knowledge in line with techniques, changes to technology, advancements in practice, because nothing ever stands still. Everything moves on.
It's almost at a glacial pace as well, though, because I know you did a lot of work with, obviously, Dr. Tim Nutbeam, and I see even how long ago that was, and the exit project is still unknown or not embedded in a lot of UK fire and rescue services. So it's like we're moving at 5 miles an hour and everything else continues to move at 20. So the gap is continuing to expand, in my personal opinion.
I agree, and it's a hard one to close this, Pete. But what I would say to people is, if you have passionate individuals out there in services, in key positions like in training departments, and they're able to influence their own personnel, the small wins are gained in those kind of circles. You can't change an organisation like an FRS overnight. It takes a long time to change its direction, but the small wins can be gained from passionate people driving things on at a local level. That's probably the quickest way that these things can start to be implemented. But as we all know, there's protocols, procedures to follow. There's levels to go through. It can sometimes feel like you're wading through treacle, but it needs somebody willing to drive it on. And this framework is a framework for services to develop their own structures, procedures from. So it's not definitive. It's not black and white. It leaves some flexibility in there for services to develop their own protocols from, because it's a framework. It's a benchmarking tool, and it just shows you the competencies to aim towards. Because there's going to come a point, I would imagine, where HMIC FRS will go into a service and say, "Can you show us how you're working towards these levels on this extrication competence framework?" Now, I don't know when that will be. But, that's for services then to think, right, we've got to work towards this now. But it's not going to happen overnight.
But I also think, like you say, alongside that, they're coming in asking questions about culture and core code of ethics. How are you adhering to the fire standards? But when we look at the expected, people reference things like operational discretion. But when we're looking at things that are known hazards and known incidents now, I say when we look at the HGVs and we look at the EVs, you can no longer sit behind these are unknown things that we're not aware that we'd come across this within our incident. So you almost, the excuses are going to they're going to fall on deaf ears when they don't have it. What's your services policy for dealing with an EV fire? What's your services policy for this? Some people are really going to struggle to answer those questions.
I agree. No, I agree. And I suppose most public sector services are in this position of not having an answer for every problem. It's impossible for them to do that. But if they can show they're working towards improving their knowledge, experience, development of personnel, if they're moving in the right direction, that's at least a start. But plan and reality are so very different. It's just, we need this document, this framework to show best practice and what to work towards, just so organisations aren't slipping backwards. Because that's the crucial thing here. We've got to be moving forwards and developing.
So to go into the weeds of what's within there, we'll try and pick out a few key aspects to give some people some familiarization. Again, we'll put in the show notes a PDF for people to go and take a look at. But the Extrication Competency Framework outlines the knowledge, awareness, performance criteria, and training required to obtain and maintain competence in road vehicle casualty extrication. Each level relates to fire and rescue services roles and should be used as a benchmark for training departments and road traffic collision extrication responses. So there's 5 levels to this, and they are aligned to some of the aspects within NOG. So when we're looking at level 1, they've got listed there firefighters in development. So simply safe to operate on the incident ground, provide scene safety, set up equipment, prepare the road vehicle for casualty extrication. I often think that firefighters in development are those under the greatest risk at some of these types of incidents because they don't have the holistic understanding of some of the surrounding hazards. I've read a couple of reports of people being hit at road traffic collisions and various things there's no real safe place for a firefighter to be because we operate within that inner cordon. Firefighters in development are tremendously vulnerable because they don't have the base knowledge to recognize a lot of these hazards because they've simply not had the experience, and they are in dangerous environments to operate around with projectiles. And we're trying to get to grips with a lot of the evolving hazards with road traffic vehicles these days. And I certainly think that first level 1 is probably one of the most vulnerable people in the group.
I would say you're probably right on the money there. But the other challenge is, as our services lose their experience through retirement, natural wastage, you've got a younger, lesser experienced workforce coming through. They're being pushed to the front left seat a bit quicker to become incident commanders. So there's all of those kind of challenges to be had. You're absolutely right. That is going on. But again, it's kind of a reason why the framework exists as a nod towards, a framework, a standard to strive towards. But fire and services have got so many competencies to maintain, so many sub-role competencies and so on. It's very difficult for them to say competence in everything. So again, it's plan and reality are so very different. Every service will do its own thing, but this is a document that all services can look at and, again, as a nod towards developing, moving forward, consolidating their expertise and knowledge for the benefit of their own staff.
Because there's no real gap between then stepping straight into level 2, which they consider to be a standard RTC practitioner. So we're talking, competent firefighter, but within that, and I agree with them, and to be fair, they add the aspect of heavy rescue as an expectation that every firefighter should have familiarization and the requisite skill sets to be able to respond to a heavy rescue incident. And in my personal experience, in a lot of UK fire and rescue service, that tends to sit within a heavy rescue unit or a technical rescue station where a lot of the HRUs are based. So I think that will be something very difficult for services to train all of their staff to. And again, you can be very clever with your terminology. It depends how you want to, state familiarization and competency. Can I just give them a PowerPoint with a bunch of pictures of a lorry pointing at this? And that might be their justification. But I think, and again, this is one of the things that IRRTC do really well, is the ability for people to actually interact with these vehicles, because they're not just a larger version of a car, as stupid as that sounds. The complexities of these vehicles is very different.
It is very different, Pete. So the risks change, the hazards change hugely. And if you haven't been exposed to these vehicles, you won't have that familiarity and knowledge and experience to fall back on. But what I want to give a nod to here is all services could, and this isn't a hard sell, it's just a signpost. If you have a look at the United Kingdom Rescue Organisation as a base of developing professional rescue, of which we're an approved training provider, as well as others that will become in the future, they have something called the UKRO Academy. And the UKRO Academy, and again, if you wanted to share a link to this on the post note, the notes, that would be great. In there, you've got technical rescue guides, you've got modules that people could do. A service could buy into this, an individual could buy into this. But that knowledge is there to maintain or to make yourself familiar with. If your service hasn't got a training package in place yet, or there's one being developed, again, I think you're right. It's going to be the technical rescue units, the heavy vehicle rescue stations that have got this extra layer of knowledge, competency, and resources. But there's a benefit to every service having a little bit of knowledge here, because they could be the first attending crew at such an incident until those that next level of skill arrives.
I'm glad you've referenced that, because it really is an incredible library. So we will link this in the show notes. So there, we've got approved training providers, IRRTC. They are endorsed by the Institute of Fire Engineers. They've obviously got work, and there's a video on their homepage with the Exit Project as well. So for people's familiarity, the content's been developed by experts in each field of study, and the training is designed to elevate and support already high standards set by responders and performing rescues. They've got 130 films and quizzes, increasing every single week. It works in a modular way, each one focusing on a particular subject. The UKRO Academy is the largest repository of information available on the net. I mean, they've got over 500 and something supporting documents. I am going to have to go down this rabbit hole, because it's been mentioned to me several times, but I can easily see me missing or losing 2 days or more in this, because the technical guides that are involved within it as well. There's numerous on there that I think people can access, a lot of them for free as well, which is great. It really is a fantastic thing. I'm not sure how much the memberships are for it, but we can add it in the notes and people can go over and have a look. But do you think people will do this as a station then, or because they can, by the look of it, purchase multiple? I don't know, this is not a sales pitch for the UK Academy, but it's just trying to give people insights into how sustainable it is to give people this access. So yeah, it looks like they can pay for groups to access this library, or they can, or some of these tickets. Mind you, when you look at a service level, yeah. So, I mean, you can have 1,500 to 7,000 users. So if we're looking at someone like London Fire Brigade, they can pay £9,000 and get unlimited access. I don't know if this is a yearly plan they pay or something like that. Someone's put a lot of work into that by the look of it.
Yeah. They have. This was many years in the making, and there's a lot of people behind the scenes of it. But it's great, Pete. It's absolutely great that this platform exists. Multidisciplinary medical technical rescue all together for the benefit of our emergency services today. You can't make people go and look at it, but that information's there, up to date, relevant, unlike your Learn Pros, Melios, My Learning, whatever your individual services use.
It makes Nog look a little bit of a joke, to be honest, because Nog needs some work doing on it, I think, in my personal words. But yeah, this looks like a well put together thing. That sounds so harsh, because people far smarter than me, far more experienced than me, have put a lot of work into it. I just think they've got a bit lost in the fog sometimes, and it's not as much of a friendly website to navigate, Nog. That's my personal words. But anyway,
no, I've got colleagues that are sort of seconded to the NFCC that kind of work in the background on this sort of stuff. So yeah, I get that. There's nothing that's ever perfect, but UKRO Academy, it's a good platform, and it's always evolving. and it's there as a source of reference, and I just wanted to give due mention to it.
So in your mind, would you think
because that would
people
work.
could send a number of workplace trainers for that on-hand practical, really get immersed in a heavy rescue thing, such as a facility such as yours, and then to support their dissemination of that information to the wider service, potential might be for people to look at something like the UKRO Academy, and I'm sure there are others out there. Would you see that as That's probably, to be fair, the amount of access they would get, the immersive experience they get with you. That's probably some low hanging fruit. I bet. Yeah, I think that's achievable for probably most fire and rescue services. To be honest, I know I'm very lucky to have been on one of your courses, but I know there's a big demand out there, especially as all these people are retiring. We need to be able to replenish that knowledge set. Today's podcast is powered by our partner Lifelines and their revolutionary approach to functional hydration. Just like in firefighting, water is essential for body function, but studies show more than 80% of firefighters are dehydrated. A 25-year study findings from the National Institute of Health showed poor hydration to be linked to early aging and chronic disease, and even mild dehydration results in significant negative impact outcomes including headaches, exhaustion, rapid pulse, irritability, and poor cognitive function. A study conducted by Yale University showed that participants who were just 1% dehydrated had a 12% increase in errors when performing tasks that required cognitive flexibility. In addition, dehydration is shown to worsen mood and attitude, contribute to confusion and poor decision making, and negatively affect memory and judgment. In other words, you really don't want your incident commander, firefighter, or for that matter any first responder on a critical scene to be even slightly dehydrated. Mild dehydration occurs when a person is just 1.5% dehydrated, a condition that does not even trigger the thirst response in most people. So just imagine how quickly a firefighter or any first responder can and does become dehydrated in their day-to-day duties, which is why I address my hydration first thing every day with Lifelines. Go into the notes for this episode and specifically check out Lifelines Hydro Fuel and Hydro OG by clicking in the notes for the podcast for a clean energy solution designed for those who demand more from their day. Now back to the show.
No, you're absolutely right. So it's there as a solution to a well-known problem. But, how many FRSs we've got?
Yeah.
Well over 40. No two are going to work the same. They've all got different priorities. Understand. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but this is a good solution. To upskill people. But you're right. It comes back to the service-wide instructor coming on a course, getting that exposure knowledge to then take back to their own service and make it work for them. What I would say to you is though, most services I talk to, when it comes to RTC training, one vehicle per watch per quarter to train on, and that's a car. So where are we going with our exposure to crews for technical rescue operations with vehicles if we're only getting one watch per quarter, one car per quarter per watch?
Yeah,
that's
100%.
Problematic. So when you look at how likely you're going to get HGV tractor unit to train on, then if you're only getting one car per watch per quarter, you can kind of see why we offer this. There's a relevance there, and all we're thinking about is services and obviously members of the public.
I think it's going to be even more difficult for people to get hold of second-hand vehicles.
Yeah, I can tell you now, we have many sources of vehicles from cars upwards, and we are already starting to see the chain of supply being squeezed because as everything moves on and the vehicles become newer and so on and so forth, And the other thing to think about here is, Pete, we're training on vehicles that might be 10, 12 years old, and they're often complete, they're not damaged, whereas ones at the roadside are.
So I know when you use your vehicles, you actually damage them. So you've got a series of tools and vehicles where you can simulate damage to that vehicle. But a lot of them, they're dropped off on stations. You could with a good mechanic in a couple of days, you could drive it. You could drive it home if you wanted to.
Yeah. So there's that element, and just the fact that some of these vehicles now are made from composite materials, and rescue tools may not work on them the same way as traditional types of construction. So, so it really does start to raise some big questions. And again, this is why we're in the business of enabling people to have exposure to tools, vehicles, training, just so they're developing, learning, and moving forward. That's what we're here for. And we're glad to be able to do that. In conjunction with other organisations too. It's a synergy. No one is better than anybody else.
When I look at the list of competencies they've got in there, a lot of these, if we're totally honest, let's not catastrophize. A lot of these things, people, when they go through this matrix, and we'll put the PDF in there, they will already be able to achieve a lot of this stuff. Yeah. So in the competency framework, they've got the legal aspect, guidance, they've got roadway infrastructure. A lot of this can be delivered either on site or in your local area with no real specialist equipment. Scene safety, tool safety. This is stuff that people have already got on their, on their trucks and stuff like that. Planning and command, scene management, casualty care. Although casualty care is evolving a little bit in the last couple of years, so that might be somewhere to go. But when we get into the aspects of fuel systems, because it's road vehicle technology is an aspect of this competency framework, and again they've got in there fuel systems, electrical systems, road vehicle structure, construction materials. You don't get those choices in a lot of training departments as to the types of vehicles and the complexities. To be able to order something from a list. I want something with these reinforced structures, I want something with this composite, and I want it to be a hybrid, I want it to be an EV. You kind of get what you're given, and you're lucky if you get it. So I think it's those aspects. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. People haven't got to put their hand in their pocket to go for external training with a lot of this. But there certainly is those aspects. And again, the heavy road vehicle rescue, PSV, heavy road vehicle stuff in there is something, again, that I think people are really going to struggle to be able to tick those boxes.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. Which is why the latter part of that document, it's a 14-page document. Towards the end of it, the last few pages are around PSV, HGV, and it talks about, and it aligns to all those 5 levels. But it's really hard for services to get exposure to these vehicles.
Just expand on PSV, sorry, for people that aren't familiar with what PSV are.
Public service vehicles like buses. So one of the things we offer is, Pete, there's a hell of a lot of experienced instructors and technical rescue operators out there in our UKFRS. There really is. But how do they maintain their competencies if they're teaching their own personnel at learning development or training school? So we've put together a 2-day accredited CPD course where it alternates between HGV and public service vehicle, i.e. tractor unit bus or LGV bus. And the framework dictates that, alternate years, you're supposed to be able to work towards achieving some kind of contact with those topics. So to give you the example, 2-day course. Day 1, you start on a 7.5 tonner. Loads of those available, not a problem. Then you step up to a tractor unit. Now they're hard to get. We've got a good supply,
and they're very unique as well. They have a lot of different systems, the exposuring of the wiring, the way the vehicle's set up, the weight distribution of that vehicle is a very different beast to wrestle with. It doesn't behave in the same way.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You take the door off a car, it's one thing. You take the door off a HGV, you're working at height, it's very much heavier. You need to be operating on a work platform. Everything becomes much, much, much harder. Taking the windscreen out is a totally different ball game to a vehicle.
That's something you can just handball off as well. You've almost got to capture the load of these doors when you're looking to control the release of that really heavy piece of material, and you're probably 4 or 5 feet off the ground. It's not like you can just when you have you've not cut the door properly, or you're spreading it away, or whatever it might be, and it has a big old pop. You can get away with as much as you shouldn't need to. You can get away with a little bit of a less controlled approach to some vehicles when you're on the ground, and you can just back off or let it pop away in the wrong direction. We're not saying that's the standard. We're not aiming for that, but it's forgivable. When you're sat on a platform and it's about 4 feet across, and there's only room for 2 of you, 3 sort of maximum, whilst you've got this door open manipulating it, and you're trying to hold a heavier set of cutters, spreaders, recips, whatever it might be above your head, that's a bloody hard working environment.
Of course it is. And everything is bigger, stronger, heavier. It takes longer to do it. You've got medics in there. it changes the game, but it's very incident and situational specific, of course. But the point being, this 2-day course we offer, it allows exposure to those existing instructors, so they can get their competencies, they can get hands on the tools. They can be directed by Kev and Al, absolute geeks in their field. Let's be honest about this, but that's wonderful for the students, that's on the course. So they just take that knowledge back and just then spread it wider. That's because we also take them to a vehicle testing facility, and we show them around brand new vehicles. We show them around vehicles that are a year old. They can go underneath that vehicle. They can look at all the structures and the risks underneath a trailer. They can look at all the air systems. We can we can show them all the risks around the cab and the vehicle anatomy, because it's so important. So we do that with a really big LGV operator in the country that's also a recognised VOSA testing centre. We've got an excellent relationship with them, and every course we take a cohort down there and show them around brand new vehicles, like what is running on the road.
I think that's so valuable, again, because when you're delivering non-stop, you've always got your nose to the grindstone. It's like I always said about businesses, you're so busy working in the business, you don't get to work on the business. You're not developing yourself because you're just too busy deliver. But also, and I'll say in just total honesty myself, I'm sure I am behind the curve versus a lot of other instructors in the UK, because whilst I know the hazards that things present, I don't know their mechanical purpose in many cases. And I'm just say that of my own poor knowledge. I had a crap vehicle when I was younger, and I did various things myself, changing brakes and spark plugs and all that sort of jazz. But beyond that, I wouldn't be able to crawl under. And this is where sometimes you find yourself at incidents on the motorway, and it's the old bullshit baffles brains. No one really knows. So someone that's just got a little bit of confidence says, "Oh yeah, that's this, or that's that, or that's the bloody." You haven't got a bloody clue. Do you know what I mean? Can you imagine how much BS was going on before we had these ERG systems, and before we had this crash data, and before we had these other things that could actually tell you on the spot exactly what you're looking at?
No, I absolutely agree. Obviously, it was like when there was no mobile phones and information.
That's one of the greatest stories, because someone was telling you about a fire in America that was 50 stories high and killed 700 people, and you couldn't just Google it and go, no, that's rubbish. Or, you know what I like using now, which is not ideal, but I use Google Lens. Do you know what that is?
Google Lens?
That's
I do, yes.
Great,
I do.
isn't it? You can point that at things on the vehicle, and it'll rifle through the million stuff that's on the internet, or whatever, is billions of stuff, and it does that, spatial identity, facial recognition / pattern recognition, tells you exactly what that is, almost exactly what vehicle it is, how much it is if you want to replace one, and then if you can follow that rabbit hole. And I've used this sort of in investigation purposes when something's gone wrong and it's in a controlled environment. Again, you don't necessarily have the freedom of time to do this stuff at an incident, but if you have got a training vehicle and you're not sure what something is, yes, you can go into the crash datas or the ERGs of the world. But if you want to get into the finer details of what is that thing, most phones have got this on them for free now. Just when you search in Google, I think it's on the right hand side. You can look at Google Eye or Google Lens.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And on vehicles, there may be things like QR codes which lead you down the route of what this is and how to deal with it, kind of stuff. But again, there's no standardization there. So that's what we're aiming for with this HVR CPD. The 5-day, it's not an instructor course, it's an operator's course, right? People come on it, hopefully, if they're already in RTCI, and it's an additional specialism to your RTCI. So it's very desirable to be an RTCI before you come on it, but you don't have to be. But there's a real need for this 2-day CPD for existing instructors that are struggling to get exposure to the vehicles.
The framework for the level 4s, which is the instructors, they've got the 48 hours CPD, isn't it? So, 12, 16-hour, 2 9-hour days, 2 10-hour days, whatever it might be, goes a long way towards supporting people's CPD for that aspect of it.
Yeah, and in some services, there are very excellent, credible people delivering the training internally, but then all it takes is a station manager or a training lead to come into service and say, we're doing this in-house. That's nice, but should we have somebody external delivering this, because we then can't wash it down and affect the quality of it? I mean, there's arguments for and against. All we're trying to do is maintain a good. We're trying to cascade good or gold practice in line with UKRO standards, because we think that's going to serve operational personnel best at the roadside. Because come the date of an inquiry, somebody with a curly wig could say, well, how up-to-date is your training? How knowledgeable are you? Who trained you? Are you competent? Was this foreseeable, avoidable, preventable?
And they go, well, we were all trained by Mike at the Learning and Development Centre. Okay, good. Right, Mike's on the stand. Mike, when's the last time you yourself interacted with a heavy vehicle? Well, I mean, we covered it on my RTCI.
Indeed.
When was that? 9 years ago?
Indeed.
Right. Okay.
Indeed.
And you are the
Indeed.
fountain from which all of the information in your service comes. And the last time you were on one was 9 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 2 years ago. You know, and then they'll just embarrass people. They'll bring up all that. They'll go, right, we've got a specialist from the vehicle, the vehicle manufacturers or whatever, and we'll go, can you give us a laundry list of just the last 5 years? Let's not go to 9 years. What's some of the revolutions of technology in the last 5 years? And they'll go, well, we've got this. Okay, rest there. Mike, do you know what that is? No, I've no idea. Okay, carry on. Have you got this?
Oh.
Mike, do you know what that is? Can you just give us a 5-minute introduction as to what that is? No, you don't know it. Okay, no worries. And
100%.
mate, it would just be embarrassing, wouldn't it? It'd be terrible. And I would be one of the people embarrassed because damn right, I would fail on many of those counts, no doubt.
And Pete, you're so right. It's a good example. It's probably at the more extremist end of
people
the
feel
example.
like we're catastrophizing, but
that's where things could go.
I think it's more foreseeable now because the vehicle market has accelerated in its technology so much. We were kind of in limbo for 20 years with the combustion engines. And there was some improvements in the materials used in the framework. Some of our tools weren't up for the job. And, we went through the NCT thing, God knows how many years ago. And we'd upgraded, diamond blades, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. But now, these aren't just incremental changes where, you can keep doing the thing you used to do, but it might just take you a little bit longer. Now, you can't keep doing the thing you used to do because that just ain't going to work at all. Even if we give you 4 days to do it, you'll either hurt the firefighter or you won't achieve the task.
No, exactly, and we see this a lot when someone comes on a course, and I'm not the technical rescue expert on the HVR course. It's very much Kevin Al, and they don't miss a whole lot. So as soon as they see somebody standing with a tool, positioning that tool, even before they've started to cut that with that tool, they know that person's capability right there and then.
100%.
And that's why then they'll try and work with that individual over the time to try and shape them, evolve them in a way that kind of works. And we're seeing now, you're seeing the differences between a service that comes in that offers its training internally, station-based personnel, cascading it wider, or to then someone like Kevin Al that's got a good understanding of national standards. You can see the difference is stark sometimes, and it's a great reason to put the course on and offer the training.
What I do love about Kevin Al as well, though, is not even though, with all due respect, they're significantly more experienced than me, I never felt like a student, if that makes sense. Obviously, I was a student and I was listening intently all the time, but there was no roll in their eyes, there was no shaking of their heads, there was no who taught you. You know what I mean? They were very much recognizing you. Look, you're a subject matter expert as well in your own. And I'm just going to show you a few different options. And when we talk about options, that's one thing I do love about the facility as well, is the breadth of tools that you guys and girls have got there, because it gives you the opportunity to see different options outside of what your service has traditionally gone for. And just, again, that old firefighter terminology, these are just tools in the box. All of these will achieve the task. Some of them are better or worse. Some of them have pros, but also have cons as well and setbacks. I love that. And the way that Al and Kev taught the course for me, I felt like a respected colleague more than just a grunt. Because, sometimes when instructors do go on instructing courses, you have to have that humility about you. And I think some people struggle with that because they're transitioning out from the day-to-day being the instructor. I am the font of knowledge. Kneel before me, and some people have that, not many, although they don't tend to last too long unless they're in like a small service and they do their empire building. But a lot of people, when they come to courses like that, they have to have a bit of humility about them. But Al and Kev really created a fantastic environment personally for me. I don't know, I've been in contact with Al since. Al's actually on my list. I loved spending time with Kev as well, but Al, he's got a great voice as well. You could listen to that guy all day. He's got some stories. He's authentic, old school firefighter with such experience. I love that guy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And sort of, and the more modern times we move into, the more we have to be careful with Al, because he is our diplomatic attaché, as Kev calls him. But he's a brilliant guy, and he's still very active with the UKRO at challenges regionally and nationally. So he's right up there. But if you remember back to your RTCI, you had a great fella called Pat Sheridan.
I loved the session with Pat. Yeah, I think it was on the final day. We did because you get so heavy into all the tools, and you get so heavy into all of the technical capabilities, and his technique for that, and his technique for that, and you have to remember where to position this and the different way to use the chock. Pat did a great session with us where we'd picked up all these tools over the first few days, and he said, right, I like to run a little bit of a session now that forces people outside of their technical comfort blanket. And I think he did an inverted car on one of them, and he says, right, I want you to get access to that car, find me a safe way to extricate the casualty. Let's do some space creation without the tools. So we're all like thinking sneaky, I'll tell you what, I've got bloody, I've got my combi tool in my pocket. Maybe I can use that. And no, you can't use that. Maybe I can,
Nope.
Can I choose one thing off the fire engine? No, you can't. You don't need anything off the fire engine, And just his ability to stabilize the vehicle, space creation and extrication with no tools at all. With just that.
Yeah,
they always say common sense isn't commonplace, and we seem to fall in love with the super complexities of some of the aspects of the role, and some certainly require that with the technological age, but it should never replace some of that common sense approach to it. And Pat is one of those really sort of he's unspoken, he's quiet, but he's a bit of a ninja. He's got such a wealth of knowledge, but he doesn't want to force it upon you. Like, if you're not willing to listen, I'm not going to beat you over the head with it.
No.
But if you're interested, I've got some great stuff I can show you. And I think it was that final day. Pat was amazing. I really enjoyed that session with Pat. I think I even said to Al, not for Al's frustrations, because Al had done so much of the technical stuff, because you really do need to get that right. But I enjoyed Pat's session the most, I think, because that spoke to me, in my retained days where you didn't have, the HRU was 40 minutes away. You didn't have all this stuff. What can I do here and now? And actually, there's a lot you can do.
There is a lot you can do, and the principle is keep it simple, smart, because I think the simplest things are the things that make the biggest difference, because you're not always going to have that Gucci technical kit, but knowledge and a pair of hands, they're two things you can use wherever you go.
No, mate, and I see many reflections of that in the ISAR world as well, where you sometimes get people from USAR specialist rescue stations, and they want all the special gadgets, and you're like, if you can't carry it
work, mate.
10 kilometers, we ain't bringing it with us. Okay, so when we get there, what can you source? What can you manipulate? What can you do to safely resolve this incident and make a bit of a difference with the limited resources we've got with us? So that mindset said a lot to me, because sometimes I see some super complex like rope systems are incredible, and I just think, when are we ever going to use this? And also, I'm nervous that I'm going to forget this because it's so complex. And we're having a rope specialist on soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, he's very good, actually, because I was going to say he'll tiptoe around me and tell me how it's not too complex. But by his own volition, he says there's a lot of people out there, teaching rope systems, and they don't have a full comprehension of it because there's very few specialists in it. It's very easy to wing some of that stuff because it is like black magic. Whereas I love the simple approach. And actually, some of the services across the UK have got, vast majorities of those services are on call or retained or whatever their terminology is in their own service. And I think, they would really, really benefit from some of those sessions that Pat certainly led, because it's just a different way of thinking.
It is a different way of thinking, but it's incredible to take that kind of mythology back to your own service and apply it, because it's achievable. It doesn't cost anything. And like you, it leaves a big impression on people, because you think, well, I can do something now. I don't need all of that stuff. I can still do this.
I've had my battles when I try and implement some of that, and some people go, well, why would I do that when I've got that really expensive piece of kit over there? You've only got one of them. I'm just saying, don't have to do this. But when you're in a 3-vehicle, and you've got 3 sectors on the go, because one vehicle's over there on the verge, one's in the middle of the road, one's in the stanchion, whatever. It's a tool in the toolbox. Okay, you can still do this. You haven't got to wait for the next vehicle to turn up because you need another set of kit. What can I do because resources are always limited. Even if you deploy the entire UK Fire and Rescue Service, you're just still going to be limited by the entirety of that resource. So having tools in the toolbox, having options that I always say, don't let good be the enemy of perfect. Do you know what I mean? Or don't let great be the enemy of perfect. This is a great solution. Is it perfect? No, you're right. If we had another 100 grand, we'd buy all this technical stuff. But you know what? We can't afford to do that on all 50, 60, 300 of our frontline vehicles. So this is a good solution. This is a great solution. It's just not perfect, you know, and that's an aspect that I really found valuable.
Yeah, it is. And that's, we try to run that at the center of all of our training, that we're operating in an environment, it's an incident where it isn't black and white. It's really super gray. And you don't really know that until you're exposed to it, and you don't really know how you're going to react until you're exposed to it. But then you've got your answer. So we try and put that into the training, and I think that's where Pat was coming from there. It's sort of in that respect. And interestingly, Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service doing a wonderful job at the moment with their extrication team, winning everything, the World Rescue Challenge this very week, and their team captain Ian Melville. Top fella, wants to come and shadow an RTCI course for us. He wants to come and do some teaching for us because he retires very soon.
Oh, and, mate, snap his arm off.
Yeah. Well, it's just listen. Ian's got so many great qualities and attributes that students and people could kind of pick up from and be inspired by and develop from. Yeah. Why wouldn't you?
100%.
But then there's equally great people out there at the Fire Service College, like Paul Hamer, top guy. There's equally good heavy rescue people out there like Gareth Lloyd, top guy. You know, everyone's in it for the same reasons. Just saving lives, man.
100%.
You know, delivering knowledge. You know, no rivalries here. We're all a cog in a machine.
Beautiful. You know? I love it. Well, Mike, thanks so much for your time today, mate. I really, really appreciate it. So for people's information, in the notes below, they will be able to find a link to IRTC's website. There's the UKRO Extrication Framework PDF. We've got the ERG Android app link.
Yes.
We obviously discussed the Luton Airport if our people want to check that out.
Yeah.
We've got links for Mike's social media to UKRO Academy, and also I would strongly encourage, as we've already referenced, one of the aspects that people are struggling to get exposure to is this HVR PSV. It's a CPD course, 2 days, 12 student max. So I know 12 students is not a lot in the grand scheme of how many people are in the UK Fire and Rescue Service looking for this solution. But it's a great exposure for people. I've been to the site myself. It's a 2-day, provides personnel with an update on existing knowledge and skills in the field of heavy vehicle and PSV rescue. They'll learn all about the latest developments, vehicle design, impact on heavy rescue operations involving heavy goods PSV vehicles, and they'll be shown the latest techniques employed in carrying out these vehicle extrications safely. So please go and have a look at that in the notes for the podcast. Mike, thanks so much for your time today, brother. I really, really appreciate it.
The Firefighters podcast was created to recognize, acknowledge, inspire, and hopefully even motivate these incredible individuals who have chosen to be part of the first responder community. Our drive and purpose is to create a legacy resource for the current and future generations of firefighters and first responders. We get some incredible feedback from listeners and guests, and as the podcast grows, our desire to create longevity and sustainability means we are asking for the support of our listeners. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to get discounts to our merchandise, hoodies, clothing, coins, patches, tallies, and also access to all of the incredible documents get shared with us from our podcast guests and sector leaders, then please head over to our Patreon page, and for just £3 a month, you can support the future of the podcast. Please finally hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on the platform you're listening, and wherever you're in the world, please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.